Recording.
We're rolling? Okay. We're here today with Dr. Leland Williams, who had a long and distinguished career in information technology and a variety of related fields in higher education in particular, and was one of the early developers of what originally was called SIGUCC and then later became SIGUCCS, and would love to hear in your own words a little bit about how things got started to the extent that you were involved and can recollect.
Well, the immediate story is that after finishing my PhD at Duke in 1960-61, I arrived at Florida State University in 1962 as assistant director of the Computer Center. E.P. Miles Jr. was the director of that center, and in the year or two rolling up to 1963, E.P. conceived the idea of a special interest group for University Computing Center directors with a D on the end. By the time we got ready, and I was working with him on it, by the time we got ready to take it to the ACM Council meeting in 1963 in Denver, we realized that the D shouldn't be there. It was for all of the staff of University Computing Centers. It wasn't just for directors. And so it was created as SIGUCC at that ACM Council meeting in 1963 in Denver. There was never any notion that it would be anything other than a special interest group in ACM. That was the total thinking. The ACM Council appeared to me to be singularly uninterested in the concept, but quickly approved it. Al Perlis, computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon, was the president of ACM. So he received it, did his job as president, and approved the formation. And the rest, as I say, is history.
Mm-hmm. And when it was originally created, what was, and particularly when it evolved from being focused on directors to focused on services, what did the group hope to accomplish?
I would have to guess to answer that, but it's just that we recognize that there were a lot of people involved in making a University Computing Center provide the services that its constituents across the campus needed, and the organization was intended to serve the needs of all of those people. So EP and I weren't smart enough, I guess, to put an S on it to invoke all of the services, but we invoked all of the services by taking the D off.
Do you recall approximately how large the original group was?
No. I think Tom Keenan was the first president, and you could probably verify that in the records of SIGUCC. In a normal course of events, E.B. Miles would have been that first president. And if anybody asked me to do it, I probably declined for a variety of reasons. And Tom Keenan, I've forgotten who he was or where he was, but he agreed to be the first president.
The community of IT professionals in higher education was a much smaller community at that time.
Yes. Oh yes. And the concept of a University Computing Center was still kind of ill-formed, and it was cropping up in different places, different structural places in universities. Possibly some seed ideas for SIGUCC came out of the Southern Regional Education Board, which, as you probably know, is a consortium still functioning today to advance educational ideas in Southern regional institutions. In those years that SIGUCC came into being, a man named John Hamlet, by coincidence, and I've just discovered this, he was inducted into the SIGUCC's Hall of Fame the same year I was, posthumously in his case. John was the director of a project for SREB that focused on university computing centers and debated where a university computing center should exist structurally within a university. And John led several conferences. He had an annual conference, Southern Regional Education Board for University Computing Center Directors, and EP and I went to those. I expect some of the seminal ideas came out of that.
Mm-hmm. And what kinds of areas of focus did most of your colleagues, you as well at Florida State at that time, and others that you may have engaged with through SIGUCCS, what kind of focus did university computing centers have at that time? Who were they serving?
I think the focus was on providing computational capability for the research and educational support across the campus. The contacts I can remember in my role as assistant director of that computing center were computational physicists and chemists. I remember doing some mathematical algorithms for some of those people. Mm-hmm. There was very much a service perspective to provide an important tool for research, supporting research and instruction across the campus.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds as though from your description, a lot of the people were discipline experts in engineering, the sciences, mathematics. Is that fair to say?
Well, not a lot of the people on the computing center staff, but our clients were professors and assistants across the campus in a variety of disciplines, social sciences as well as the hard sciences.
Mm-hmm. So they began to recognize fairly early, even in disciplines that weren't the core physical sciences, for example, that there would be great possibilities.
One of the first people I knew was a particle physicist at Florida State University, Joe Lanuti.
Mm-hmm.
Our computing center was very important to his work.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that, and he knew that.
Right, right. And how did you see in your time of engagement with SIGUCC and then SIGUCCS, how did you see that organization evolve over time?
Well, over a long period of time, it evolved away from large mainframe computing. And indeed, we talked earlier about the Triangle University's Computation Center. And my tenure there from 1970 to 88 included the years that large-scale computing was terribly important to the success of research and instruction around the campus. in 1970, and by 1988, that was no longer true. Individual workstations had become more amenable to providing the results that people needed. And supercomputing or high-performance computing had taken a niche way above that was pretty soon being met by National Science Foundation, very large centers around the country. So I saw a lot of dynamics change as those years went by.
And how did that have an influence on the composition and the direction of SIGUCCS itself?
You know, I dropped out of SIGUCCS and ACM before that really happened. I'd be interested to know what SIGUCCS does today.
Sure.
It's impressive to me that it still exists, because it's got to be a very different animal, and I appreciate you raising that question, but I don't know the answer to it. It happened after my time.
And I'm guessing that you have some recollections of those early years anyway, about how the organization went from being an idea, an embryonic concept, to something that still exists today, that has gone through various phases of great dynamic change and growth. Even though you can't talk about those later stages, do you have any recollections about the early stages of its growth?
Well, there was a strong focus on annual meetings. There was for the earliest years that I can remember, we had an annual meeting in St. Louis, engineered by a man from University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri.
That would be the flagship campus in
Yeah.
Missouri, yes.
And I remember when he retired, and we all kind of wondered, where do we go from here? Because he kept those meetings going in St. Louis. After that, I guess we moved around to other places, and other people took over. I don't know. One of the most fun activities that I remember was the peer review committee. That's something I brought home from my sabbatical at University of Edinburgh, and saw how it worked in that environment over there, and brought it home to SIGUCCS, and they adopted it, and I don't know if it's still running or not, but we put together committees of 2 or 3 people to go and assist a fellow computing center director somewhere in the country with figuring out how to persuade his superiors to do what he needed to do.
Right. Any other sort of leading lights that you can think of? Any of the historic figures, people who came across your landscape and that left an impression on you as people who were particularly interesting or innovative? You talked about an innovation that you brought back from Edinburgh in the peer review. Are there others who, either in the practice of computing itself or in some of the peripheral things associated with computing, organizational issues and so forth, that you recall? Somewhere, for example, somebody came up with the idea of professional development. And I've always been curious about how those things start and how they become part of the fabric of how we think about our field.
I immediately think of a colleague whose name I can't come up with. When I knew him, he was in charge of university computing academic at the Naval Academy. And he led some discussions I can remember on how to properly represent your institution with the hardware vendors. But I don't remember any insight I might have into how such ideas found their way into the structure of ACM, structure of SIGUCC.
Andrew, anything else that you can think of that we should be covering? Anything else that you would have expected me to ask that I haven't asked?
No, I don't think so.
Anything that you think, for the sake of the historians in SIGUCCS who are looking for you to fill in some of the
I think
gaps.
you've got all that my brain will come up with, and you've already got something in the 2006 edition that
yes.
will fill in any gaps. So I thank you for coming around.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
And I hope Jack is satisfied. You can record that.
We got it.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
It's been a delight, and I
I appreciate you coming
you
out.
letting us interrupt your day.